Welcome. Our next session will be in English. However, if you have questions to the author, you can post them in the comments in English as well as in German, and we will translate them for you. So, our next author. Inventing stories is in his DNA. He started writing very early in his life and never stopped again, which is our luck because Benedict Jacka gave us the wonderful character of Alex Verus. This highly successful series with book number 6 just released in German and book number 11 in English, so for German fans, there's more to come, has inspired people around the world. Welcome, Benedict Jacka.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here. So, Benedict, one of my first questions would be, you've been traveling the world as far as I understood, but Alex Verus, he's based in London as you are now. So why did it have to be London for Alex?
It didn't have to be, and actually some of the previous books I'd written before that had been set in various other places. But although I've traveled around the world and lived in a few other places for short amounts of time, London, I've spent something like 90% of my life in London, so I know that place much better and more deeply than anywhere else.
And especially Camden?
Camden, actually, I don't know as well as some areas, but I grew up in an area quite close to Camden, so I used to visit it from time to time. And
so for those who might not know Alex yet, and we want to introduce him to them, would you give us a little description of the character and what you thought when you wrote it?
So let's see, those are quite different things. A description of the character, he's a mage, a diviner who runs a shop in Camden Town with checkered history. And what I was thinking when I wrote it, it's hard to answer that because when I wrote Fated, or the book that was originally going to become Fated, it was the 10th book I wrote, and the previous 4 books before that had all failed to be published. So by the time I got to writing Fated, I was in a bit of a mood to try pretty much anything. So there are an awful lot of things in Fated that I never really planned out very carefully or deliberately or anything like that. It was all just completely off the top of my head. And most of Alex's personality and details were just made up off the top of my head.
So are you rather writing by inspiration, or are you plotting the later ones, for example? Are you plotting more, or is it all?
The later ones are much more plotted. The first 2 in particular were completely written off the top of my head. The second one especially was written very fast, and I didn't plan out anything. But the longer the series went, the more it became one integrated story. So I had to plan that out more and more. And by the time, I think around book 5 was where I started seriously planning out the entire direction of the series. And by about book 7 or 8, it was mostly set.
Yeah. So Alex, he lives in London. He's a mage, as you said, and he's a little bit switching about, let's say, the real world and the magical world, and trying to survive somehow, right?
Yes.
So as I told you when we talked before, I'm at book 1 because I've just become a fan, and there are a lot of characters around him, but especially there are a lot of gadgets, magical items you invented for him or for this world. How did you get to find these items, these magical things that they work?
The various little items he used and things like that. Do you mean where did I get the ideas for the individual items, or why?
Yes.
A lot of different locations, but probably the single biggest place I drew ideas from were the role-playing games I used to play when I was younger. A lot of them. One thing you often have in fantasy role-playing games is there's a lot more emphasis on magical items than there is in books and movies. Books and movies will tend to have, they like the idea of magical items, but there's usually just one or two items, and they'll all be a big focus of the story. In role-playing games, characters will have entire toolboxes full of greater and lesser magical items and non-magical items as well, which they use, and the attitude is much more that it's a toolbox or a set of equipment, and the same character will keep on upgrading and modifying their collection of items over the course of a story. And that was more what I was thinking of.
Yeah, it's how they survive the adventure, right? They need to place the right item at the right time.
And also a very common thing is that they'll use items to cover weaknesses. So if there's something they can't do themselves, they'll get an item or a collection of items that can handle it for them. That was the kind of thing I had in mind with Alex.
And he actually uses them to cover his so-called weakness that he's only a diviner, or only a diviner. And that is how he can move on in the story, right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm just reading what your fans are saying. So we have at least one fan from Saxony-Anhalt, and he loves the Alex Verus books. But he was sad how everything turned out with Sonder, because he has been his favorite character. So he's been a little bit further into the story, I have the impression.
Either that, or he just read the novella that came out yesterday. It might have been that as well.
So Robin, if you hear us, did you read the novella? And he also says he hopes that he will see Morden again. He loves his interaction with Alex. So I don't know. He's probably as at 6 or 7 or the novella. I don't know if you can already disclose if Morden will be.
Yes, Morden. The books where Morden shows up the most are actually the ones in the future of where the German series has got to. Morden's biggest roles are in books 8, 9, and 11.
So Robin, there's more to come, definitely. But if we go back to book 1 to talk a little bit, or not to book 1, but the series in whole. So one very important character in the series is definitely Luna. He's the counterpart, more or less, for Alex. Can you tell us a little bit more about, where she comes from, why she's in the book?
Let's see. It's hard to say why she's in the book, but I do know where she came from. She was a composite. Her physical appearance was a composite of 2 or 3 different people that I knew, combined with a character in a piece of media that I'd been a fan of from a while ago. But her personality pretty much just developed along the way. She's one of the characters I like the most now, because she's the one I've spent the most time working on. Because back in the very first book, Fated, Luna's character, the very first draft of it, Luna's character wasn't terribly good. Her personality was defined too much by her curse, and I really struggled to write her because I didn't have enough of a grip on her personality. So, however, book 1, Fated, got a very heavy rewrite before it came to market. The version if you guys now saw the original version, you'd struggle to recognize it. So much changed between the two. And while I was changing it, my editors hadn't asked for any changes to Luna, but I felt that she needed some. So I spent quite a while working on her. And somewhere around between books 1 and 2, I did manage to get a handle on her personality. And as a result of that, she went from the character I had the most trouble writing to the one I had the least trouble writing. And now she's one of my favorites.
Oh, they're talking about your Ask Luna column on your website. And it definitely flashes her character, someone says. So she's feisty. And I've seen that on your website. It's amazing how many details the people ask. So you have a very strong fan community, don't you? And
yes,
you interact with them quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my website's been up since 2012, and I've put up a post on it every week ever since then. So over the time, I've spent an awful lot of time talking to the various fans and readers there.
Yeah. And do you get inspiration from them as well, or
rarely? It's much more the other way around. They'll ask me something, and I'll have to think up an answer to it. I suppose indirectly, yes, because I will sometimes think of something because they've asked me a question, and I've had to work out the answer to it, and the answer isn't something I would have worked out on my own.
That's quite a good connection. So here's another German reader and is asking, current German books so far only. So he or she, I don't see it really, is wondering if we will see Starbreeze again at some point.
Yes. is the short answer. I won't tell you exactly when because it's a bit of a surprise, but yes, she shows up again later.
Okay. So that's riddle solved as well. You've been talking, let's get away a little bit from Alex Verus. You've been talking about the books you wrote before, the Ninja series, and I know it's not published anymore. You can only get it secondhand, but I saw a lot of people asking for the books. So maybe let us know, what can we do? Who can we call to make them publish the books again?
Actually, the rights have reverted back to me. So in theory, I could publish them at any time, but I just haven't gotten around to it really. Also, I'm a little bit worried about what my readers would think, because I wrote the Ninja books around 2002 or 3 or something. So almost 20 years from now, and around 10 years from when I started writing the Alex Verus series. So I was a much newer author, nowhere near as experienced, and things like the writing quality just isn't as good. So while it would be very easy for me to publish them again, I'm a little bit embarrassed about doing it because I'm worried that readers are going to pick it up and think this author is terrible.
I don't know. When I hear you talking about how you rewrote Luna, although the editor didn't ask, and now about that, are you a perfectionist? Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
When I'm writing my books, I'll generally edit the section that I'm doing as I'm writing it. After I've finished the section, before I send it to my beta readers, I'll give it another edit. Based on what my beta readers say, I might change a few more things. After I've finished the entire book, before I send it to my editors, I'll give it an entire edit. After my editors get back, then we do the first round edits, which will include any rewrites. And then after that, there'll be the copy edit stage, which is going through the entire book line by line, and making somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 of individual changes. And I'll go through all of those. And at every one of those changes, I'll often be making my own changes because I'll see something I don't completely like. So by the time you guys actually see one of my books, I will have gone over it so many times. I spend a lot of time fiddling with it and polishing it and changing things back and forth.
It sounds like it. Yeah, definitely.
So I don't know if I ever republished the Ninja books, if I rewrote them, they'd end up being quite different. So I'm not sure whether it would be better to rewrite them or just sort of leave them as they are for historical purposes, I guess.
All right, let's we will be surprised about what's going to happen. I have another question here. It's mentioned in the books that Verus is a mage name. Have you ever considered what Alex's normal surname might be? Because
Yeah.
I've always wondered.
Yes, you just don't fight. You just never actually hear it. There's a conversation much later on where Alex meets one of his parents and they're talking about it, but I don't actually say what the name is because it doesn't come up in conversation naturally.
Okay, and can you tell them what it is? Can you tell us what it is, or do you want them to read?
I haven't told anyone.
You haven't told anyone. Okay, okay, then I'm not asking.
Basically, Alex changed from using his old surname to his mage name at some point, and he just doesn't use his birth surname anymore.
So that's it out there.
And pretty much everyone he interacts with has only ever known him since he switched his name, so they'd have no reason to know it or call him by it.
Yeah. So it's Alex Verus, and this is what it will stay.
Yes.
We just said it's book 11. Book 11 is released in English now. Book number 12 will be the last one, if I understand that right. The big final, I know 12 books, it's quite a lot and a long series, but are you a little bit sad to leave, Alex?
Not really, because one of the reasons that I chose to end the series where I did was I wasn't tired of the series and I wasn't bored of writing Alex's character, but I had the feeling that if I kept on stretching it out, I eventually would be. So it feels to me like it's quite a good end point, and I'm very happy with finishing the series there. It feels like a good number. It's long enough to be quite an extended series, but it's not so long that it drags excessively.
Yeah, that people start losing interest or anything like that. But then I also saw that you have some new ideas and that you have something new in the planning already.
Yes, I'm going to be starting a new urban fantasy series probably around next month or so. That's what I'm hoping for. My current plan is to try and write that over the last 6 months of this year. If everything goes perfectly, I'll finish it by the end of the year, but it might overrun a bit. I am taking my time over this one a bit because I've got the luxury of being able to do that now, whereas I didn't have that so much for the Alex Verus series.
How was it, by the way, or is it, because you're in London, we shouldn't forget, during the pandemic, was that a time where you could write better because it was quieter, or was it actually more busy?
It had very little direct effect on me, to be honest, because I think, like most authors, I lead a very isolated life. My work day is just getting up and writing, and I'll usually go out briefly for something or other. But apart from one brief trip, it's pretty normal for me to spend several days in a row barely ever leaving my house. And so because of that, anything going on outside doesn't affect me very much. So I mean, I don't have an office to go into. I don't have a commute to do. It's pretty much just I get up, I do other things, and I do my writing. So
pandemic or not?
Yeah, but it did not make a very direct difference. Obviously, there was a lot of indirect differences, and other people in my household had their own issues to deal with. But it doesn't affect a better way of saying it doesn't affect my work.
Yeah, but it affects the family life, of course.
It affects family life and things like that.
Yeah. So I've got another question. Do you know that Morden, the word Morden in German means to murder?
Yes.
Was that planned? So is that a pun in there? Only we Germans understand, or
No,
was it?
he's, and I don't think this is exactly a secret at this point. He just got his name from a character on a TV show called Babylon 5.
And they probably don't speak German.
No, I don't know where they would have got the name from, although there's a district in London called Morden. So it has a second association there. But Morden as murder wouldn't actually be a very good association with Morden in the first place. So if I'd known at the time that my book's going to be translated into German, I probably would have come up with a different name, because Morden isn't really a murder happy serial killer in the first place.
Well, so for all the next novels, I can tell you, don't use names like Morden. They surely will be translated. So let me see. Is his use of both his first name and his mage name modeled after his old master's use of both names? So we are talking about Alex again.
Yes, it's one of those areas where Alex claims to be completely opposed to his old master in every possible way, but whether unconsciously or not, he ends up falling into a lot of the same habits. And as several readers have noticed, he's got this very unusual habit of using his birth first name and then his major name as a second name, which the only other person you've ever seen in the series who does that is Richard Drach.
So here comes a hi from Richmond, Virginia. Will we ever learn how or why Alex chose Varys as his mage name? I think no, it's another question. So is Varys something that means something for Alex?
The meaning is just the Latin. That's where it comes from. But the idea is that Alex got the name via an encounter in Elsewhere back when he was Richard's apprentice. The idea was all 4 apprentices did a trip into Elsewhere and picked up their mage names along the way, although only some of them ever got to use them.
I'm looking, you just telling me. I overlooked the question. I'm very sorry, but I have a nice guy sitting beside me who reminds me. Where is it? Is there anything planned as in a movie or a TV series adaptation? That would be interesting.
Lots of people have asked that. There are TV rights. I think there's currently a production company that is claiming to do something with them, but there hasn't been very much movement on it for a while. That basically the TV and movie industry in America and England is unbelievably slow, particularly the American one. It's not uncommon for books to languish for 5 or 10 years in the process before a movie ever gets shot, and those are massively popular bestsellers. So the only books that get fast adaptions are either the ones that are incredibly lucky, it's just random lightning, or the ones where they're so unbelievably successful that the film producers know they're going to make truckloads of money, so they rush it through. So we're getting at in the case of Alex, we've talked a lot about it. The best model for it would be a TV series. There are lots of ways in which you can do it, but dealing with Hollywood and film production companies is so difficult. There is a bit of the comment I usually make to people who ask this is that getting a film or TV adaptation of a book series is like qualifying for a bank loan. the joke for qualifying for a bank loan is to get a loan from a bank, you have to prove that you don't need a loan from a bank. So with film and TV adaptions, to get a film and TV adaptation, you have to be so successful that you don't need a film or TV adaptation. If I had to guess, I'd say it probably will happen someday, but God only knows how long it would take. Years and possibly years and years.
But you would definitely like to do that. You would.
I'd love to do it, but yeah, getting it to happen is unbelievably difficult.
Well, there are so many pay TV channels now. They are looking for good content. So
yeah, fingers crossed. I would be happy to do it, but
yeah, you just said in the beginning you've been traveling quite around the world, and I read that you worked in, for example, China and in Romania, which is completely different from, you know, traveling on vacation to another country. Did these experiences, like living in foreign countries and foreign cultures, help you to find inspiration, to see people in another way? And
no, it was nothing to do with that. It was more just because I found it interesting. Back in my 20s, I didn't have that many commitments, so I'd do things like occasionally go backpacking for fun, or take work contracts to teach or work in another country for a little while. The longest one was the China trip. The others were a bit shorter.
But it's good to get to know other cultures and see what other people think. And
no, I found it really interesting. I don't know if I'd ever apply it directly to my books, but I found I learned way more from working in another country than from just visiting it, though. Like, there are quite a few the sort of order is actually working in another country for a decent length of time is how you learn the most. Visiting on your own and just traveling around and going to random places is somewhere in between, and just taking a holiday there is you kind of learn the least. Like, I used to go on holiday to other countries as a child, and I don't think I ever really learned anything from it. Just
what the hotel looks like.
Pretty much, yeah.
So let's see, there are a few more questions. We've been wondering about Morden's hair. This is super arbitrary, but they'd like to know, wait. Does he get live-made treatment, dye graying hair? What?
They're asking, there are various hints in the books that Morden's older than he looks, so they're asking why whether the reason he's got jet black hair as opposed to graying hair is because he's got a life mage dye. Life mages couldn't actually dye your hair. Hair is dead matter. Life mages can only change the living matter. Morden does something that has in the long term a similar result, but I haven't worked out in details exactly how he deals with hair coloration.
So that's something for the last book. If you could pick any mage type for yourself, which one would you be and why?
The most fun one would probably be air, just for the ability to fly, but I've always had the feeling that the kind of magic you'd get and the kind of magic you'd want might not be exactly the same thing.
Okay, here comes some feedback. It says, not a question, more some kind of feedback. I'm absolutely in love with the little references. House MD Pokemon made my day every time I ran into something like that. So you're a Pokemon fan?
Not a little bit. I've played them a bit and I know a lot about it, but I slightly missed it. I was born in 1980, so my generation is just a little bit above Pokemon. Same with Harry Potter. I was a little bit too old to be a child when the Harry Potter books were coming out.
Yeah.
In the case of Pokemon, I didn't watch the cartoon, but oddly enough, the way I got to know about Pokemon was through the collectible card game, because I did used to play a couple of them, and it was only after the collectible card games in England and America had gotten popular then that Pokemon arrived from Japan and just completely swept the entire market. So me and my friends who used to play CCGs were suddenly seeing Pokemon cards everywhere and a bit confused by these strange cartoon animals.
Okay, some more questions. Oh, what countries do your books sell most in? This is
to begin with, it was the UK first. At some point, America overtook the UK, but recently Germany has gone up there as well. And my German sales have been very high. I don't know the exact numbers, but now it's basically those are the big three for me now. England, the UK, USA, and then Germany.
Yeah. In how many languages have they been translated?
It's English and German, obviously, then French, Russian, Czech, Swedish. I think that's all of them. French and Russian are the next two big ones after German, and then Czechoslovak, and there was a translation from a while ago in Sweden.
Well, there are not so many people in Sweden as in Germany or France. What's your favorite villain?
Villain,
yeah, sorry.
I don't know if he exactly counts as a villain, but it would probably be Cinder.
Yeah.
But it's questionable whether he'd count as one by now.
So that came from Robin, and he actually states that he liked most of the black mages, but he hates a lot of the white mages, especially Levistus.
That's quite a common reaction. A lot of people seem to much prefer the dark mages to the light ones. Yeah. I've had several people. It does seem to be common that people sort of viscerally hate the light mages a lot more than they viscerally hate the dark ones, which is quite impressive given how horrible some of the dark mages are.
Oh, and I think we caused some envy when we counted which languages we have with the books, because there's the question, are there any plans to translate the books into Spanish?
I don't think they've had any success with selling rights in Spain. The way these things work is that my agent has a person who does foreign rights, and they go to the book fairs. I think the Frankfurt Book Fair is the biggest one, and then they'll sort of shop them around to various publishers. That was how the German translation got started. Don't think there's been any interest from Spain as yet, but I don't know, it might happen.
And Frankfurt Book Fair didn't happen the last 2 years, right?
Which didn't help. The German one was set, but the German one was signed and settled a while before that, I think.
Yeah.
So it had already been set in motion before the pandemic happened.
Yeah. Well, if book 6 is already translated, yes, I guess so. Yeah.
I think book 7 is probably translated by now. Actually, it's kind of, I've seen the cover for it and it's scheduled. I think Blandvalet are planning to bring them out at 6-month intervals, so it'll probably be something like book 7 later this year, then 8 and 9 for 2022, 10 and 11, and then 10, 11, 12 the 2 years afterwards.
So they are coming. That's good to know.
No, I think it's pretty much settled at this point that all 12 are coming out in German.
Great. Is there anything you could tell us about the Mage Society or Council in Germany?
That's one I haven't actually worked out very much. I know a little bit about the French one because one of the antagonists, Alex, runs into is a French assassin mage. And I've worked out a little bit about the American Council because, again, there's some past history involving that. But I think that there's one German character later in the book who would have a connection to it, but I've never needed to work out all of the details. One thing about the way the Alex Verus series is, I didn't work out a lot of the details for the international side of the world. It was always focused much more on the British side. So to figure out stuff like how the German Council works, I'd have to spend a lot of time in detailing stuff, and often I just didn't have the time to do that in addition to everything else I was doing already.
I can imagine, yeah. So we have a question about the new books which you are planning. How will your new books be? Will they be the same or similar to Alex Verus, or very different?
Pretty different. The magic is going to work very differently. The main character is going to be quite different, and although it's still urban fantasy with some of the same traits to that, I'm designing the world much differently from the beginning. Like it's a more international setting this time. So this time I am actually thinking about other countries and international relations and things like that.
Yeah. And there's a second part to the question: will there be more romance involved?
In the next, you mean in the next series?
Yeah.
Probably. I'm still working on that part. There'll definitely be some, but I don't know whether there'll be more or less.
All right.
Probably more.
I think this is what they wanted to hear. So another question about Alex Verus. Do the mage councils just stick to basically arbitrary country borders because it's easier?
I think I've worked out some vague details of this. They mostly overlap with country borders, but you do have some amalgamated ones. And it's so some countries, some of the smaller countries in particular, share councils because there aren't that many majors out there, and it wouldn't make very much sense. But for the most part, the lines on a map for the councils would look pretty similar to lines on a map for real world countries.
As usual, yeah. So here come a few questions about, and I don't know how to pronounce that, Arachne? Arachne, okay. In German it would be Arachne. Will there ever be some kind of reveal how Arachne and the cave system and all the animals work and how this alliance was formed? Is there in the later part?
The Arachne and the what system?
The cave system.
Yeah.
The under the tree, the system.
Oh, the cave system.
Yeah.
No, basically not very much. This is this is something that was ancient before Alex ever got involved. One of the things about the Alex Verus series is that the world's a lot bigger than Alex, and despite the fact that he knows an unusually large amount for a mage, there are still entire areas that he knows nothing about whatsoever, and things like that. The history of magical creatures and relating to things like dragons, it's something he really doesn't know anything about at all.
And as you tell it from his point of view.
Yeah. So you only know what he knows.
Yeah.
When it comes to that really isn't very much.
Yeah.
What was the other part of that question? I think there was the second one.
How was this alliance formed? And I think there's a second question which goes in this direction. How did Arachne and Alex first meet? So
It was connected. It was to do with Richard, actually. Richard knew Arachne tangentially, and they had met each other and spoken. So Alex met her originally through him.
Yeah. And here comes the next one, who apparently knows the later books. Could you tell us how Richard met Arachne?
That I haven't worked out in detail. That would be another one of those potential short stories that might or might not ever get written.
Okay. All right. Enough spiders for today. And we are actually already more or less at the end. This went quite quicker than I thought. I would say, first of all, thank you to everybody for all the great questions. As I said, you have Ask Luna on your website. So if you have more questions for Benedict, go over there. And second, of course, thank you very, very much, Benedict, that you took the time to talk to us and to present Alex Verus to us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. And maybe we meet next year again to talk about the other books.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.